Hey everyone, John from Nintendo Life here. Kirby! Unlike Mario and Link and Samus and Pit and so many other Nintendo icons from the early era, Kirby is only now making his 3D debut with Kirby and the Forgotten Land. But if you've been around the block, if you're a long-running Kirby fan, you're probably familiar that this guy's attempted to jump into 3D multiple times, and he actually has done a couple of times. So I want to explore the history of 3D Kirbys and show you the closest thing we've had before Forgotten Land. So without further ado, let's jump in. Let's make our 3D jump. I was 2D before now. I'm gonna come into your screen. Kirby had a rough transition into 3D. In the year 2000 came Kirby 64 The Crystal Shards, Kirby's 3D debut? Kinda? His polygon debut at least, if we don't count Smash. It was still a side-scroller like his previous efforts, but this was pretty much a 2.5D game before that genre became popular. Safe to say though, this wasn't the 3D Kirby fans were expecting. It wasn't the Mario 64 moment. Fans were eager that the big 3D Kirby game wasn't too far off, and maybe it would come with the GameCube. And not long after, we kinda saw it. During Spaceworld 2001, Nintendo debuted Kirby Tilt and Tumble 2. This was a sequel to the Game Boy game, only in full 3D this time. Miyamoto showcased it by connecting a Game Boy Advance to the GameCube, having a special gyro pack in the Game Boy Advance, and tilting the system around. But unless you're from an alternate universe, and if you are, how is it? This game was very quietly cancelled. But Kirby wasn't done on the GameCube because in E3 2005, we saw the next mainline Kirby game following the footsteps of Kirby 64. It's still a side-scroller, but it's much more refined 3D. Now you probably also know this game never released, but fascinatingly, it bears a striking resemblance to Star Allies. You can get enemies to join your team and be AI-controlled buddies, and you can even stack them like this, which you can do exactly in Star Allies. Really strange. So while we never got this Kirby game, don't fret because we also didn't get two other Kirby games. There's this one, which is a more cartoony traditional Kirby side-scroller, and then there's this one right here. Now the actual GameCube Kirby game became Kirby's Return to Dreamland on the Wii far later, but these two screenshots right here were revealed to us during the Kirby's Return to Dreamland Iwata Asks. Throughout the entire GameCube cycle, they just couldn't fixate on a Kirby game. Well, apart from Air Ride, which in fairness, technically is the first 3D Kirby game where you can roam around and fly. During City Trial, you can just get off your vehicle. You only have a certain number of jumps and you can't really do much outside of your vehicle, but this is Kirby in 3D technically. But anyway, these prototypes are fascinating because of course, this one is fully 3D, and would see this again. The best Kirby game out there is of course, say it with me, Kirby Planet Robobot. If you said something different, you're going to jail. Not only is the gameplay so enjoyable and different and fresh compared to other games in this style, but it also came with two bonus games. One was Team Kirby Clash, and the other was Kirby 3D Rumble. This is the interesting one because look at this image, and now look at Kirby 3D Rumble. It's the exact same concept. It's the same grid-based floating cube level design, but clearly the stakes and scope of 3D Rumble are much smaller because first, there's no copy abilities. It's not even really a platformer, you basically just clear screens of enemies and then go on to the next gauntlet. It's a horde mode basically. So while 3D Rumble is very limited and very short, I beat the entire game in around 10 minutes, it did still show us how this concept could work. And you know what? It feels good. Kirby's gone back to his Game Boy roots and has no copy abilities at all, so all the enemies you suck in are essentially just projectiles to fire back. There are only 3 levels and it is just 10 minutes long, but there's still incentive to come back. Get a higher combo, hit chains of enemies, get a higher score. It's an interesting side mode to a much more fleshed out game, of course, being Robobot. But Nintendo weren't done with this concept. In 2017, a month after the Switch launched, the 3DS got Team Kirby Clash Deluxe, an expanded version of the other minigame. Switch even got a game based on this too with Super Kirby Clash. That was in 2019. But in July of 2017, Kirby 3D Rumble got the exact same deal with Kirby's Blowout Blast. This took the same core gameplay, a 3D Kirby with no copy abilities, but this time it wasn't just floating cubes, these were fully fledged levels. Instead of being 10 minutes long, it's now more like an hour long. It'll take you around that time to finish the game's 5 worlds, but there's a bunch more you can do in this. If you get gold trophies, you unlock EX levels which are much, much harder. This can be a 5 or 6 hour game depending on how much you put into it. Still not very long, but it is very simplistic. So the same rules apply, it's still all about scoring combos. It isn't just enemy after enemy, there is a little bit of platforming in here now. But sometimes the game does just go, okay, enemy time, you can't move, defeat all the enemies. It's still very much a brawler than really a platformer hybrid. But what's here still is a lot of fun, and really it is the first 3D Kirby platformer. You can jump and float and inhale and exhale, and there's even traditional Kirby bosses. Lololo and La from the first game are back, in full 3D this time. They've made cameos in other games, but this is pretty much the first time this boss battle's been reimagined, and it works really well in 3D. You've also got Kracko Jr. and King Dedede, and this time he goes big. He's a big boy. Look how big he is. If you've never played this game, I think you are missing out on a key part of Kirby's history. It's definitely not incredible, but it is this game here, come to life. If they didn't experiment with this game, then Forgotten Land could look very different, and I'm happy it turned out the way it did. The grid structure works here, but it looks very artificial. I love how natural Forgotten Land looks. So Kirby's been trying to break out into 3D for a very long time now, and while it's briefly happened before, it's properly finally happening in March. So had you heard of these cancelled Kirby games yourself, and have you played Kirby Blowout Blast? Let us know in the comments below, and be sure to inhale that subscribe button. Like that. That's the Kirby sound effect. And we'll see you next time. Bye everyone.